Hi, I'm Ardith, and today's video combines two of my favorite things, limes and rainbows. After using only black and white earlier this week, I'm craving some full spectrum fun. Plus, I've been lucky enough to be invited to celebrate a YouTube milestone with Erica and Maria in a rainbow-themed video hop. And that gives me a perfect opportunity to pull out my limes methodology for translating inspiration into my own cards. Let's dive right in. First, a quick refresher. LIMES stands for listing the elements of your inspiration, deciding what to include, modify, and exclude, and how you want to put your own spin on it. Here's the inspiration I chose from Erica. Let's list the elements. A gray card base, oval die cuts inked with multiple rainbow colors, hearts, and a black die cut sentiment. I'm starting by inking up some white cardstock with a rainbow of pastel mini ink pads from Catherine Pooler Designs. I'm going direct to paper with this, using the ink pads themselves as stamps, pressing them down randomly all over this half sheet of cardstock. I'm not going for smooth coverage here. In fact, the rougher the better. I want lots of overlap and texture, and I go over it a couple of times to add even more color variation. Then I grab some Ebersole shimmer spray. This adds a gorgeous shimmer, and it softens the colors quite a bit. Once the panel was dry, I grabbed the rainbow felt die from Ellen Hudson. I like this one because the arcs are separate dies, and you can choose as many or as few as you like. I'm just going to use 3 on this card. I find it easier to tape them together for die cutting. That way they act as one die, and that saves some time. I cut 4 layers from white cardstock, and I stacked them up with some liquid glue. I also cut it 3 times from my rainbow panel so I could maximize the color variety in each rainbow. I positioned 2 rainbows on my 4 1/4 inch square card base and glued them with liquid glue. Next, I used an Ellen Hudson wave die to cut a strip of clouds from a scrap of Pearlescent Vellum from Fawn. I measured against the card so I knew how wide I needed the scallop strip to be to cover the ends of the 2 rainbows. Of course, they're still somewhat visible behind that translucent vellum. I cut a heart from the rainbow cardstock I created, and now I'm positioning it on a sentiment strip so I can position the sentiment stamp before stamping it with VersaFine Onyx ink. I adhered the strip and the heart onto the vellum strip, and I put the white panel onto an oyster card base. It's got so much shimmer, it really doesn't need anything else. Now let's assess. I included rainbows with multicolored arcs. I modified the gray card base. Instead, I used a white panel with an oyster card base. I used 1 big heart rather than multiple tiny hearts. I stamped my sentiment on a strip rather than using a black die cut. I didn't really exclude anything. And for my spin, I added that vellum cloud strip. Now here's the inspiration I chose from Maria. Let's start again with List. It's a horizontal slimline card with a rainbow background that was created with 3 colors, yellow, pink, and blue. The background has some stenciling on it with glimmer paste, I think. There are 2 floral vellum elements, 1 on each end, and a big black die cut sentiment with a smaller stamped sub-sentiment. I have this Slimline scallop tag die from Crafty Meraki, and I've cut it from Vellum. I treated it with an anti-static embossing bag, and now I'm stamping a field of tulips on the bottom of the tag with Wow embossing ink. Then I turned the tag in my MISTI and I stamped it again. And because of the angled shape of the tulips, I'm going to get really good coverage of the whole tag with these 2 images. I sprinkled some opaque bright white embossing powder over the top, and then before I went any further, I let my heat gun heat up for about a minute. This vellum will warp if I'm not careful while heating, so to avoid that, I did 2 things. First was to make sure my heat gun was really hot, and now I'm constantly moving the heat tool over the tag. This definitely slowed down the melting process of the powder because I wasn't waiting for one area to melt before moving on, but I ended up with a flat tag in the end, so that extra time was definitely worth it. For the rainbow portion of this project, I'm doing another direct-to-paper technique, swinking. Swinking is just a silly word that my friend Laurel made up, and it means I'm swiping ink onto the paper. I did yellow, then pink, and then I skipped blue and left a space and did yellow again. This was so I wasn't swinking my yellow ink pad over wet blue ink. I did overlap the stripes, and that will give me the orange, green, and purple that Maria had on her card where her inks mixed as well. I measured that I had enough coverage for the tag die, and then before I cut it, I used a stencil created with another Crafty Meraki die, Bubble Mania. I taped it down to the rainbow panel, and then I used blending brushes to blend the ink over top. In the end, you'll see that the bubbles don't really show up on my project, but I'm leaving this in because it was inspired by Maria's stenciling on her background, and also to show you what a fun look you can get with this easy technique. As I said earlier, this video is part of a hop to celebrate Erica and Maria reaching a YouTube milestone, and there's a giveaway courtesy of these amazing sponsors. So hop along and leave a comment on all the videos. Winners will be drawn randomly from the comments, so the more videos you comment on, the better your chances to win. More details are on my blog and in the description box below. So you can see that this is a really fun look, but I'll have to use that idea on another project because as soon as I laid the vellum tag over top, that stenciling completely disappeared. For my sentiment, I used the congrats dies that came with the tag set, and again I layered it up, ending with black on the top. I love that chunky, solid look of the layers, especially with a chunky, solid looking font like this. To attach the vellum tag, I put liquid glue behind only the letters so that it won't show through to the front. And finally, I added a little sparkle with some stickles in some of the embossed outlines on the vellum. Okay, let's assess. I included a 3-color rainbow, vellum, floral elements, and a black die cut. I modified the orientation, and I covered the whole project with the heat embossed vellum. I excluded the stenciled glimmer paste, but I added some sparkle by using some stickles. And as far as adding my own spin, I changed the project from a card to a tag. Inspiration comes from all around us, and it's even more special when our friends inspire us. I love having a kind of checklist for analyzing my inspiration and then making it my own, and I hope you find it useful too. I have a playlist full of other videos showing how I use limes in my card making. But first, it's time to use the link below to hop to the next video. Don't forget to comment for a chance to win. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.